Yeah, that's real danger territory for the Republicans, particularly in the House, but now increasingly in the Senate, we're seeing polling in some states like Ohio, where an incumbent Sherrod Brown, who was defeated, is coming back to run for that Senate seat. Some polling in North Carolina suggests the former governor Roy Cooper's going to do well. So now the sort of when you think about sort of contagion, it's spreading and it's spreading from the House to the Senate, and that will affect what we're dealing with Obamacare subsidies and sort of the renegotiation of turning them into Trump subsidies. The pressure will build on the Republicans
Right.
because of this particular poll.
And Paul, just as a sidelight in a six-paragraph story, thank you, CBS, for helping me on this. Immigration within this poll goes from 43%, 49%, 49% down to 38%
Okay.
approval.
Wendy, how do you think, what role do you believe the president will play in these midterm elections for various candidates across the country?
Well, I think the president wants to play a key role, particularly in the next 6 months, in the primaries. We saw this Marjorie Taylor Greene. He threatened to support an opponent of hers in the primary for her congressional seat. Maybe Nancy Mace. She's running for governor. We'll see if he gets involved in that race. We're going to see him try to exert his political power with his base. But it seems like the coalition that brought him into office again in 2024 is now fractured. Independents seem to, according to polling, have left that coalition, have soured on the president. And so that leaves the base. And in these competitive House districts and some of the competitive Senate seats, you can't win with just the Trump base.
Wendy, what is the political calculus for the president's actions vis-a-vis Venezuela? Up until recently, I wasn't aware that Venezuela was a big source of drug inflow to the United States. I guess I kind of always thought it was Colombia through Mexico, and that was kind of where the focus should be. What's going on with Venezuela?
Well, Paul, in his most recent sit-down interview, he talked a lot about Venezuela, and the interviewer said, but Mexico is the largest, supplier of fentanyl to the United States. Why aren't we going after Mexico? And there's all sorts of obvious reasons why we're not going to go after Mexico. I think the idea of Maduro hanging on to power, which is ironic given the rhetoric of the president on the 2020 election, but I think the idea is that that's not the kind of government that the Trump administration thinks will be friendly towards the United States, and it's not the kind of government that hardcore conservative Republicans support. So if they can topple Maduro, and of course, the opposition leader won the Nobel Peace Prize from Venezuela. So
Yep.
when you think about that, it's sort of the legitimacy of the Venezuelan government and Trump sort of exerting his influence in different spheres of the world. And I think that's what's driving his focus on Venezuela.
Wendy Schiller with us with Brown University. Wendy, I am bedazzled by the success of the Democrats in the mayoral race in Miami. I looked at the map, actually. It's just amazing, the nuances of that victory. A white woman, decades of Republican power, a Democrat takes Miami. Wendy, was this about the Democrats doing better, or maybe is this a generational shift in Cuban Republican politics?
Well, that's Tom. I mean, I like the term bedazzled when you refer to Miami. It sort of goes together. But I think there's two things. Exactly right. So we have polling that suggests that third generation, for example, Spanish immigrants don't speak Spanish the way that their elders did, and they don't identify as strongly. So that's one thing. I think you're really hitting that point. It's also that the Democrats are going back to the roots of getting votes out the door, something they did not do well enough in 2024. We've seen this in Jersey and in Virginia, certainly in New York. But I mean, in Miami, it was get your people to get out and vote. And that's, I
Right.
think, how this victory happened. And that should scare the Republicans. Because if Democrats are figuring out how to get particularly younger people, but getting their people out, then that will sort of equal the Republican efforts in 2024.
Well, Paul and I were talking about this. I mean, as simple as I can, Eileen Higgins, Mayor Higgins of Miami, how distant is she from our perception of Harris Democrats, of liberal Democrats?
Well, I mean, I think the difference is that the Harris campaign didn't have a lot of time. They had an economy that was starting to get better, but people did not see it that way. So, sort of trying to sell yourself now, the Democrats can say, come back to us. We care about affordability. We care about making sure you can have a decent quality of life. The other party does not care about that. And look at the evidence. They're not doing anything about that. And I think it makes sense to voters now, particularly in the Democratic base, that their party has come home to them about what they care about most. And the Democrats, even though the Republicans edge them out on the economy generally, the Democrats edge out Republicans on things like health care and education. And so I think that's where the Democrats are hitting the sweet spot. If they can match it with organization, they'll do very well in 26.
Wendy, it's December 11th here. What's the to-do list and what's the schedule for Congress? Do we expect anything from our Congress in the coming weeks, or are we just kind of limping along to the new year?
Well, Paul, defense authorization always passes. They just passed it in the House. They'll get it through in the Senate. The president will sign it. Some bills that have to pass, defense authorization is one of them, always pass. And so the question is, what does Congress think is the must pass? I think there are growing voices in the GOP, again, on the Senate side and the House side, saying we have got to do something on health care. We have to pass some bill. Even if it doesn't pass, the whole process and become law, let's get something that we can go home and say we did. And it looks like they're bumbling right now. But that, to me, is what I'm watching, trying to get out the door before they go home. It looks unlikely, but it's possible Republicans can pull out something that they pass, even if it's not signed into law.
And then when we come back in the new year, how does Congress behave in a year where there's midterm elections here? What should we expect here? Or is it just focusing on the elections coming up in that November?
Well, first of all, let's look at how many more Republicans may walk out the door. We've had a fairly strong number, a high number of Republicans who say they're not running again, particularly in the House. So let's see whether that number goes up. Because if you start to see more of those announcements, particularly in January, then you're really seeing the reality hit that they think they're going to lose the House, and they're getting out now. That's one thing politically I'm looking for. The second is we've another budget fight at the end of January.
Yeah, that's right.
Start all over again with reappropriating the government's expenditure. So we're going to have another budget fight at the end of January.
Wait, I'm not up to speed on this. Are we going to have another shutdown soon?
Well, I don't think the Democrats are going to shut the government down again, because I think they pushed it to the limit and it got a little risky because it hurt, the snap. Trump played hardball on that, and he'll do it again, although snap is protected now for the full next year. And there are some provisions that are protected, veterans, snap. So they kind of left the door open to do a little mini shutdown without too many consequences. But I think they want to avoid it, because then the Democrats look like an obstructionist party, and that's not what they want to look like going into 26. They want to look like they can get something done.